Welcome everybody to today's panel. I am Mike Lux, and I'm on the board of Netroots Nation, have been for many, many years. And I also worked on Joe Biden's very first presidential campaign 32 years ago. So I have that unique combination of things in my biography. Heather Booth, who is the Progressive Outreach Director for the campaign and an old friend, approached Netroots Nation suggesting that the campaign wanted some of the senior staff to come on and do a presentation and then do Q&A with folks about the campaign strategy for involving Netroots activists, progressive activists, and those of us at Netroots Nation thought that was a wonderful idea. And so I will let Ashley Allison, who is the coalition's director at the campaign, introduce the panel. But I wanted to welcome the panel. It's a great panel. We're going to be talking about GOTV. We're going to be talking about all the challenges that the Trump people are throwing in our way. And we're going to be talking about sort of activism strategy in general. So we look forward to the panel, and we look forward to Q&A. I will manage the Q&A. Look at all the questions that are coming in on that thread, and pick out questions when the panel presentation is over. So Ashley, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Mike. Hey, everyone. Excited to be at the virtual Netroots, and excited to have this conversation. As Mike said, I'm Ashley Allison. I am the National Coalitions Director for the Biden campaign. Started on June 1st and have been working to build a campaign that was already doing this, but expanding and making sure that everyone who is in our party has a seat at the table and a place in this campaign. A part of doing that was bringing on Heather Booth, who needs no introduction, but as Mike said, is doing outreach for our progressive community as well as older Americans. We have Rachana Desai-Martin, and she is our voter protection director, and we know how important voter protection is going to be in this election, so looking forward to hearing about the work that she is going to be doing. And then Cristobal Alex is going to join us in a few minutes, who is a senior advisor to the campaign, has been on the campaign actually from the very beginning, and helps do outreach to the progressive community, but as well as the Latino and other different communities across our country. I'm going to start, part of my job as the coalition is we have coalitions for everyone. We have African American, Latino, LGBTQ+, young folks, progressive, seniors, rural. We have a place for everyone in this campaign. We have that here nationally. Our team is about 30 folks, but we also have over 1,600 people on the Biden for President, as well as our coordinated campaign, doing organizing in a very new way, because none of us have run a presidential campaign in the middle of a pandemic and doing it virtually. So we're learning from you all, we're learning from each other in the states, but we are in 17 states with staff on the ground. We're in the following states of Nevada, Colorado, Minnesota, Virginia, New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Michigan, Florida, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Maine, Iowa, Ohio, Arizona, Georgia, the 2nd District of Nebraska, and Texas. And if we didn't mention a state that you're in, we still have staff that is doing our expansion work, and so we can get you connected to the right folks there. We also have a distributed organizing approach and a relational organizing approach. We want to keep our staff, we want to keep our volunteers safe, and we know that some of the in-person engagement that normally would happen, door knocking, I'm an organizer by training, just isn't possible in this COVID era. It's not responsible, it doesn't show leadership, and the Vice President is most concerned about keeping people safe. And so we have lots of tools. We just launched our Vote Joe app that folks should download if they haven't done so they can get updates and alerts. You can start building your relational organizing work. So if you have your friends and you want to get connected, and they can start texting, and you can build your own, your full volunteer network in states. But we also, like I mentioned, are doing a lot of work on voter protection and making sure that we're going to the institutions that already exist to reach people. So for example, in the African American community, we know that, you know, Black men are a population we really want to focus on and talk to during this election, and that they would normally go to the barbershops, and barbershops just aren't what they used to be. So how do we build an organizing model that still is able to connect them and meet them where they are, but realize the new challenges? Or same for churches. We will do a Souls to the Polls. It's just gonna look a little different this year. But that doesn't mean people aren't still going to church. It doesn't mean that kids aren't still going to college. They might be doing it virtually, but they're still getting emails. So we're going to meet people where they are. We would love to hear different ideas that you all are working on. And ultimately, we want to win on November 3rd, but we also want to build this partnership to make sure that when we win in November, we can govern and include everyone as we're developing policies and getting this country back on track. I'll stop there, and I would love to turn it over to my colleague, Heather Booth, to talk a little bit more about the work she's been doing since, I think it's only been 3 weeks, but it feels like 3 months since she joined the campaign. So Heather, feel free to take it away.
Thanks so much. I also, by the way, want to say one thing about even being in this campaign, though I've been in many, many other campaigns, both on the issues and on organize and in elections. But Ashley's leadership and the leadership of the campaign is building itself a caring community. And I do think a campaign reflects the leadership that you have. And this campaign is about building a caring community in the society overall. So Ashley, I really appreciate your leadership particularly. And I certainly appreciate Netroots. I've been there before. I've been there in raucous times. I've been there in good times and happy and sad times. Good to be with you virtually, even if I can't be with you physically. The folks at Netroots, you are a key part of the movement that's making history at this time. And because of the work that the Netroots are doing, and that you're doing, both those doing on the ground organizing and online organizing, we're making the possibility of progressive change that is amongst the most dramatic and inspiring. I've been part of the struggle for social and economic justice for over 50 or more years. I went to Mississippi in 1964. In fact, if you can see behind me, there's a picture. I'm 18 years old in Rollville, Mississippi, playing the guitar for Fannie Lou Hamer at her home, the great civil rights leader. And if you don't know her name, you should figure it out. And if you do know her, we can certainly celebrate her because we're in her tradition, carrying on these struggles for justice. But it's particularly at this moment that many of those struggles, much of the progress that we've made is being pushed back on civil rights, on women's rights, on what's happened on the environment. I just heard today, Trump has just done something to weaken the methane rules. It's like, think of something terrible and if he hasn't done it already, he's thinking of doing it, and he'll do it more in a second term if he ever got that chance. So it's a time of both great inspiration because of the work that you do, magnified around the country, and it's a time of great peril. And it's one of the reasons, a major reason, that I came into this campaign. It's our job as progressives to make it possible for this explosive energy of the resistance to be channeled into electoral action that ends the Donald Trump presidency and sweeps progressive Democrats into power at every level of government. We need the president, we need the Senate, we need to retain and expand control in the House, and down through all of the state and local level positions, attorney general, district attorneys. It's our job to make sure that Donald Trump is not just remembered as the most racist, incompetent, misogynistic, dangerous president in memory, but also as the man whose failed presidency spawned such a great mobilization that we can create the most progressive era in modern American history. And key to this is the election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. As Director of Progressive Engagement for the Biden-Harris campaign, I'm here to really ask for your help at turning that possibility into a reality. I'm also here to sound the alarm that if progressives don't engage, if we don't take the necessary action to ensure that everyone gets to the polls, particularly in these times when Donald Trump every day is making it more difficult and frightening and frightening people about it. If people sit out the election, we could very well experience the almost unthinkable kind of an Armageddon consequences of 4 more years of Trump. And so I'm pledging every effort that I have from now through the election, because otherwise I think we endanger the future of our democracy, economic well-being of our children, for me, my grandchildren, the climate, and really the future of human beings on the planet. Failure should not be an option. So here's our plan. Short overview. We have 3 stages of our plan. From now till Labor Day, we've been doing national engagement, talking. This reason that we're here at Netroots is one of our most important periods of outreach. And to engage folks and help organizations find their way into the campaign. We want you part of it. My email, by the way, is hbooth@joebiden.com. If we can make it through all the emails, we want to respond, we want to engage. And then Labor Day through October, we drive this into the states, those 17 that Ashley described, and then also the other states of California, New York. There's lots of work to do no matter where you are. And we build a volunteer corps. And then we have the GOTV, the Get Out the Vote stage. Amongst the events that are coming up, you should just know about, Monday night, when the Democratic convention starts, and this is going to be a convention like no other. I'm told before there were 20 hours of program, there's 2 hours a night of program. There's 8 hours of program. And so it's virtual and not in person. But there will be a pre-convention watch party every night for most of the states and also for many of these coalitions. We're having our progressives watch party from 8 to 9 on Monday night. And we hope to see you there. We'll have great surrogates. I think, Ashley, can we share some of the surrogates with you now? Yeah. So we have Congressman Pramila Jayapal is coming. We have Dr. Abdul El Sayed is coming. I'm told Deborah Messing is coming from Will and Grace. And also we have some grassroots leaders from Move On and Indivisible. And we want you there too. It's going to be not a telethon to raise money, but a time-a-thon. We want to raise people doing volunteer shifts to do the work. And as organizers, you know that's what matters, doing the work. We look to you also to amplify the message. It's one of the reasons we've come. We want your ideas. We need your intelligence. Do you hear something that's going on? What's going on? What should we do? Where's an opening? Did we miss something? We'd like your advice, and we really want your partnership as we move forward. If we organize, we can change this world. We have before. We need a Joe Biden and Kamala Harris opening to allow that opening, to allow us to move together and to change the world in the future. I'm so glad to be part of the campaign. I'm so glad to be part of the progressive movement. And I'm so glad to join in partnership with you.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was great. I kind of buried the lead. I forgot to acknowledge we have a running mate and what an amazing experience this was this week, and getting to learn that Senator Kamala Harris is joining our ticket. I know for me as a Black woman, seeing a Black woman and an Indian American woman make history, it was an emotional and inspiring truth to power moment, and I feel honored to be a part of that experience. So we are now joined by another one of our speakers who always dons a wonderful hat on our video, our videos. Cristobal Alex, who is a senior advisor for our campaign and has been doing a lot of work since really the beginning of the campaign to make sure that we are engaging with the progressive and Latino community. So Cristobal, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. It's great to be with you all today. And Ashley, you know, the reason why I wear these hats is because I have really bad hair. I haven't been to the barber in many months. So I got to cover it up here. Pardon the informality, folks.
But he also came from a Texas event just now.
That's true. I was just in a virtual rally in my home state of Texas, where I think that for the first time in a long time, we have a chance of winning down there because of our ticket, the Biden-Harris ticket. because of how horrible Donald Trump's been. And even in my home state that's been red for so long, there's real demographic changes that are happening there, especially among Black and brown communities from El Paso all the way to Houston. And so that's part of the reason why Texas is in play. And we were just kicking off our first rally there with our great new leadership in that state. And I think it's par for the course if you look at what's happening around the country, where states that typically haven't gone our direction are becoming more and more progressive and are moving into this toss-up column where, with your help, we can win in a lot of places, not just in the perennial battlegrounds, but in these states that we're trying to expand out to, that you may have heard Ashley and others already talk about. I'll spend just a few minutes first just talking a little bit about our 4 pillars plan around the jobs and the economy. And then I do want to spend another minute just talking about our Latino agenda and the commitment that we've got from the Vice President on down to truly engage our community. On the jobs plan, the top issue is, as you can imagine, for so many Americans around the country, has to do with this pandemic that we're in, the COVID crisis that we're in. And there are a number of other crises that are attached to that, right? And the way the Vice President has talked about it is we've got a health crisis with the pandemic. We've got an economic crisis, the likes we've never seen before. We are in a dire strait, worse than any time in our history outside of the Great Depression. And some dramatic changes need to happen to address that. But what the pandemic has done is really put a spotlight on a lot of the systemic inequalities in our country. And the Vice President has talked a lot about that. And the other crisis that we're in right now, of course, is a racial justice crisis. And we've seen in the tragedy following the tragic killing of George Floyd, another major spotlight on that, and the civil unrest that we've seen around the country. And then last, the other major crises that are obviously intersecting here is really a climate crisis. And so in the last few weeks, you've seen a number of major policy initiatives, very robust, ambitious efforts, whether it's on the jobs and the economy plan, the racial equity piece, the Latino agenda that we just rolled out, and there's some more good stuff coming, which I'll share with you in a minute. But it really allows us, as the Vice President has said, when we are in our darkest, most challenging times as a country, is also when we've been able to do our greatest work and coming together and dealing with things in a way that not only get them back to where they were before. We don't want that. We don't want to just get back to where we were just before Donald Trump was elected, but we want to get much, much better. And that's why when we talk about the economy, we talk about building it back better. There's 4 pillars to it. The first is to mobilize American manufacturing, make sure that we're building here in America and that folks have good union jobs and that we have a supply chain that's protected, again, creating millions of good union paying jobs. The second is to mobilize our ingenuity around infrastructure and, importantly, equitable clean energy. That's going to be the future, is a clean energy future. And so there's very significant investments from roads to bridges to energy grids to schools to universal broadband to make sure that we are investing trillions of dollars into doing this. And in so doing, we're also propping up millions of jobs around the country, good paying union jobs that we'll need to address the climate crisis and also address the Great Recession that we're now in. The third part is really making sure that we mobilize talent around our caregiving and education workforce. This is a critical aspect. And this plan makes it easier to afford childcare, ensure that aging relatives and people with disability have better access to home and community-based care, and really invests for that important labor force to grow and to make all of our lives better across the country. Last part of that is that racial equity program that I mentioned. And again, we've seen this year the tragic cost of systemic racism. And Joe Biden believes that addressing those costs are core to every part of our economic agenda. So that means closing the racial wealth gap. It means expanding affordable housing. It means investing in Black, Brown, Latino, Native American, API communities. And it also means policing and criminal justice reform to make the real promise of America come true. Last but not least, and this is near and dear to my heart, obviously, is our Latino agenda. You know, I've been with this campaign for I think over a year and a half now. I was one of the first people to come in and work very closely with the vice president from the very first meeting that we've had. He talked about his commitment to making sure his campaign reflected the diversity of this country, that if he were lucky enough to be president, that his government would, and that he would prioritize our community and really compete for every vote. And that's exactly what we're doing across the campaign with senior leadership, some of whom you see on the Zoom today, and also in our policies. And so what you see in this very comprehensive Latino agenda is making sure that we are, again, doing things that we need to do as a country, including invest in the community. The vice president talks about how a quarter of all kids in public schools are Latino. He says investing in the community is really investing in our future. So there's a big push on public education, on college, on eradicating the student debt. There's also a big push to build wealth in the community because, as you all know, Latinos have been very hard hit in this recession, not just from a health perspective, but from an economic perspective. A lot of the wealth is vanishing. And so it's making sure that there's access to capital, helping small businesses, really investing in the community in that way. And we announced this agenda shortly after we marked the anniversary of the El Paso massacre. And I share that because I know a lot of folks in this Zoom today care deeply about racial justice. You'll recall a year ago on August 3rd, a gunman drove 10 hours to El Paso and committed the worst act of racial violence against Latinos in modern history. And so that meant a lot to the vice president. And as you know, he's taken on the NRA twice and beat them. And we wanted to make sure that the Latino agenda, after he marked in a very somber and empathetic way this anniversary, that we included a hate crimes component in our Latino agenda, among other very important racial justice initiatives. And so we're excited about where we're headed these final days with your help to make all of these policies into law. Though the first thing we need to do is elect Joe Biden president. So we look forward to rolling up our sleeves and working with you to do that.
Thank you so much, Cristobal. I now want to turn it over. This is an issue that is near and dear to my heart. Before I started working on this campaign, I was running a national effort to stop voter suppression at a civil rights organization, and I plan to go back and do that work after this campaign. But voter suppression is real. We heard it straight from Donald Trump's mouth about what he was doing to the Postal Service yesterday. It is a tactic to keep people of color, young people, poor people out of the democratic process. And it's something that Joe Biden doesn't stand for, and this campaign won't stand for. And we have someone who is leading our effort to ensure that every voter who is eligible to vote gets a chance to registers, actually gets on the rolls. Once they're on the rolls, can vote, and when they vote, their vote is actually counted. And she's building a team of lawyers and volunteers. And so I want to turn it over to Rachana, who is our voter protection director, to talk about the work that she is doing and that you can help us do to make sure that we save our democracy.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I just want to start by saying I'm really honored to be here talking at Netroots and to be sitting on a panel with this amazing group. Cristobal, Ashley, Heather, you all just are so deeply inspiring. And I feel so lucky to work with an amazing team where I wake up every morning and work on issues that I really care about. And I really feel like we're putting it all out there, trying to do everything we can to save our country at this time. And I hope that you all out in the audience come join us in this effort, because we really need your help. I've been on the Biden team for a couple of months, and one thing that's so clear from the very start of this is what a premium the campaign is putting on voter protection work. Voter protection is integrated into every element of our campaign, from HQ through to the states. Protecting the vote is imbued into the campaign's core messaging, our engagement work, our organizing strategies. We're doing everything we can to make sure that voting is smooth, safe, and a secure process. I think, you all know better than most, I'm sure, that America has had a long and fraught voting rights history. And that battle, especially of late, because of Trump, because of the pandemic, it's been an uphill one. Many of the problems we've seen recently, like long lines, confusion at the polling place, insufficient poll worker training, mail ballots not getting to voters on time, these things unfortunately have been a part of voting in this country for a long time. And these problems are exacerbated by the pandemic that we're facing and by a systemic program of voter suppression pursued by Trump and his party. I'm going to talk a little bit about these pieces, sort of what we're seeing across the country, but I really want to focus this discussion on what we're doing about it, what we all can be doing about it between now and November. So one thing that we know is going to happen is this year we're going to see a dramatic increase in vote by mail across the board. And in some states, like your Colorados, your Washingtons, your Arizonas, they have election administrators with deeper expertise in how to run large-scale vote-by-mail elections. And they have populations that are more used to voting by mail. And so that doesn't mean that we won't see issues there, but it means that people are more familiar with the process, that they have a little bit of muscle memory around how to do it. Some other states like Pennsylvania or Michigan and others, this is their first presidential election with no excuse vote by mail. So we really need to do more in places like that to educate voters and bring them along to the process. I think that vote by mail is a really great option, but it's not one that works well for everyone, which is something that I think we should all recognize and understand. Many communities of color have a long and strong tradition of in-person voting. And these same communities are the ones that are often disproportionately affected by some of the barriers to vote by mail. So for example, in places like Wisconsin, voters have to submit a copy of their ID to vote by mail. I mean, I don't even know how to make a copy of my ID right now when I'm stuck at home. And when government offices are closed or at reduced hours due to COVID, it's harder to get a new ID or to renew your ID if it has lapsed. Other states like North Carolina have witness requirements associated with vote by mail, which is also difficult to do in a pandemic. Many people who live in tribal communities or in more rural areas, they don't have as easy access to the postal service, so vote by mail might not be the best option for them. People with disabilities or people who don't speak English as their first language, they also face obstacles to vote by mail. Again, as I said, that's not to say that vote by mail is bad. It's not. All these claims of fraud are totally wrong. It's a very good option for many, many people, just not everyone, which is why it's important to also maintain in-person voting. I'm going to talk a little about some of the challenges we've seen with in-person voting. One thing is earlier this year in the primaries, we saw polling place consolidation. So in the Wisconsin April election, the number of polling places in Milwaukee City dropped from 180 or so from the November 16 election to just 5 for this year's primary. And the Brennan Center found that that reduced turnout by 8.6 percentage points, and that Black turnout was especially depressed from those closures. In Philadelphia, 18 polling places were consolidated into just the Philadelphia Convention Center. And to make matters more complicated, at the time, the center was only accessible by foot or bicycle because of the large police presence and road closures related to the nearby demonstrations. So I'm going to pause here for a second because that paints an incredibly dire picture, which is not what I want to leave you all with. I want to talk about what we're doing about it, because these issues are very top of mind for us. And our approach is to look at, between now and November, in the 80 some odd days we have left, what are the things that we can do that enable people to vote? What are the things that we can do to facilitate voting and to make sure, as Ashley said, make sure that every vote that's cast is counted? You know that voting laws vary state by state. So we are building a state-based, hyper-local voter protection operation that focuses on 3 key areas. The first is increasing voting options. That's making sure that voters have access to multiple safe voting options, either by mail or in person, during early vote, and also on election day. It's particularly important in a pandemic that voters can choose the voting method that works best for their circumstances. More specifically, in states, we're doing things like looking at the vote by mail processing times from the primary to see if certain localities maybe are understaffed, or we are working with election officials to review their process and see, are there certain pain points in there that we can help relieve. We're also working with election officials at the state and local levels to advocate for more early voting sites on more days and for longer hours. This will help make in-person voting safer by spreading it out over a longer period and reducing lines. Our second priority area is expanding voter registration. Campaigns talk about voter registration all the time because it's so critically important. This work is harder to do now that we can't be face-to-face and doing direct voter contact as we normally do. Our state teams are looking for opportunities to make voter registration easier by advocating for online voter registration or looking at the online registration process and trying to simplify it and working with states to just make it more user-friendly. We're also monitoring changes in the voter rolls so that we can reach out to voters who have been wrongfully purged from the rolls or who are at risk of being purged. This is really important this year. You've seen some states, Nevada, others, make announcements that they are proactively sending all registered voters or all active voters absentee ballots or vote by mail applications. All of these types of proactive election mailings, they won't get to voters if they're not registered and they're not registered at their current address. So we are really working hard to make sure that we're getting as many people registered as possible. The third bucket of our work is protecting voters. And this is where you all can really help. The best way to protect voters is to educate voters on their rights. And we're providing reliable and updated information on platforms like iwillvote.com. We're staffing voter assistance hotlines across the country that are staffed with legal volunteers who are well versed in the state specific election laws. We also, in conjunction with the DNC, have a national hotline that voters from anywhere in the country can call for help with questions like how, when, where to vote, or even more complicated things. We can help you navigate those. We're also conducting outreach and preparing Know Your Rights and other education information that's aimed at helping people navigate the specific barriers that they face. And we are also recruiting, training, and deploying poll observers to polling places across the country. These are our eyes and ears. They identify issues, and to the greatest extent possible, they resolve them on the ground, in the moment, so that everybody can vote right then. They also report back any issues that they see to us so we can be monitoring for trends and take the appropriate action. So the right to vote, it protects all of our rights. It underlies our democracy. That's why it's so important for us to be out there doing this work every day. And I think as Heather and Ashley mentioned, we need to be meeting voters where they are. Be it online, at polling places, through their calls to the hotline, through our community engagement work. We need to be everywhere, informing voters about their options and helping them exercise their right to vote. This year, democracy is on the ballot, and I hope you will join us to do everything we can to protect the vote and to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Democrats across the country. Thanks.
Thanks, Rachana. Okay, so we are about to start our Q&A process with our audience participants. I did have a couple questions just that I wanted to pose to the folks on the panelists. So, you know, I have friends that some who didn't vote in 2016, some who didn't vote in 2012, and Cristobal, this question is for you. When someone says to you, like, why should I vote, or why should I vote for Joe Biden? What, you know, for people on this Zoom, maybe they weren't supporters of Joe Biden in the primary, and that's okay. But we want you to be supporters now, and we want you to be equipped to be able to talk about why the vice president and why Kamala Harris are the best choice for this country in November when they run against Donald Trump. And so what do you say to someone when they're like, why should I vote and why should I be supporting Joe Biden?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I didn't hear. Oh, was Cristobal, sorry.
So,
And then Heather, chime in after Cristobal, please.
Yeah. You know, I think, pardon me, Heather, I think this is a really personal question for everybody, right? It's like, this is a major act. It's the most important thing we can do in our democracy. It's making sure that our voices are heard. And for all of us, we come to this for different reasons and from different places. And, you know, I'll tell you, for me personally, why I support Joe Biden and why I think, you know, our communities need to support Joe Biden. I'm the son of immigrants. My mom was a migrant farm worker. she'd traveled, through the country, typical story of immigrants, hard at work. She toiled in the fields from Bakersfield all the way to the Panhandle of Texas and settled our family in El Paso. And by the time I was born and my brother Richie were growing up, she wasn't working in the fields anymore, but she was still working 3 jobs so that we would have the chance that she never had, the opportunities that she never had. And I remember when I was little, she would tell my brother Richie and I, if you set your heart to it and work really hard, you could achieve whatever you wanted to in this country. And that's our version of the American dream. That's what's at risk right now. And I'll never forget when I was a little kid, Richie said he wanted to be president. My brother is a beautiful person, a heart of gold, will literally catch a fly to take it outside. He's also a person with autism. And I remember when I was a kid, we were on recess and some bully pushed him down in the playground. And for whatever reason, these other bullies were standing around laughing at him. Kids can be really mean. And I was a little wimp, and I just stood there and watched and froze, and I didn't do anything to protect my brother or stand up for my brother. And it's a feeling I'll never forget. It's like shame, it's embarrassment, all wrapped into one. And I swore to myself I'd never let a bully push my brother down again and not do anything about it. This man in the White House is the biggest bully of them all, ever since he came down that escalator, attacking our communities, attacking Latinos, attacking immigrants, attacking people of color, attacking people of other faiths and women. And the list goes on and on and on, including people like my brother with disabilities. Nobody dislikes bullies more than me, I don't think, other than Joe Biden, who grew up fighting bullies and is the perfect person to take down this bully. He stood up to the NRA twice. He's fought for the first climate change legislation. He is the one to do this. And when he does, all of us as a country are going to be able to breathe a sigh of relief and get back to a place where, yes, we'll be able to sleep at night again and not have these nightmares, but also the next generation, my little daughter, is going to have the opportunities and chances that I never had. And that's the American dream. And that's what happens, I think, if we all do what we need to do and elect Joe Biden in November.
Thanks, Heather. Do you want to say something?
There's so many reasons. We just held a panel in the campaign with people who had supported other candidates in the primary. Melissa Byrne was on it, who had been an active supporter for Senator Sanders.
We love her.
And she said she had changed and was now that she had decided to now be so enthusiastic and engaged in the Biden-Harris campaign, while still so grateful for Senator Sanders' leadership, because she understood what this campaign is now going to do for the possibility of addressing student debt, which is a crushing issue in her life. There's a woman, Rebecca Coakley, who has lived her life as one of the little people and knows how people with disabilities face economic inequality. She's raising her kids, and she sees what the Biden-Harris campaign can do for her life. And we had one after another. We had Jocelyn Garcia, who I think did she did the youth outreach for the Senator Sanders campaign. And we were so glad. By the way, she and I have been friends since she was a student leader, and the training center I had started, Midwest Academy, she had gone through that training center. So it's like the whole circle, the movement is related. And we had different choices at different times, some of us. And this is a time for unity, because in fact, there is a greater hope, a greater possibility. And then it's possible that we can continue this movement organizing. We can continue building from the outside, but working with people on the inside who care about us and want us to come together, as opposed to who are filled with hate, destruction, and division. But I'd also say it's not only the issues that can appeal to people. It's also the relationships. For young people, many don't vote or haven't been as sure about voting because they're not sure how to vote. They're not sure what you have to do, and Trump certainly is going to try and make it more complicated. So we need to be there and explain what to do. We need to talk to people. We also need to do that relational organizing. You and Netroots know more about, you taught all of us about it. And, so that it is the one-on-one, it's the vote tripling, it's the texting to your friends and neighbors, and because you are the trusted messengers. So it's both what we believe, the values we convey, the influencers who affirm that this is a direction that matters, committing that we also continue the organizing, and also it's the relationship, doing the hard work.
Thank you. Rachana, if so, you know, I constantly hear, I like wake up thinking about voter suppression. I go to sleep thinking about voter suppression. And I know you talked about this a little bit, but if you're not a lawyer or, you know, have a lot of knowledge about how to navigate the system, is there a place for people that will be available for people to go to get that information? Or is there a way for them to still help fight back on this effort, even without maybe like the legal expertise?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question, Ashley. And I should have touched on that more when I was talking. So I'm so glad that you brought it up. I think I saw maybe in the chat or in some Q&A that people were asking about iwillvote.com. I think that is an excellent place to go to get information. You can check your registration there. You can register to vote through there. You can find out about vote by mail there. And when in-person voting is available in your state, which is not quite yet, but when that is available, the polling locations will all be listed there, as well as I think somebody mentioned drop boxes, which are a really important thing. They're not available in every state because the laws vary state by state, but many states have drop boxes so that if you want to vote by mail, you don't have to mail your ballot back. You can just, instead of putting it in the mailbox, you put it in the Dropbox, and you can go to I Will Vote and look up where all the Dropbox locations will be in your state when they're available. So that'll be a little bit further down the line. If folks have questions, I had mentioned earlier that there is a national voter assistance hotline. So if you have any questions about what to do, or you're just not sure about something in your state, you should call. It's staffed during business hours by actual real life people who will help you and answer your question. That number is 833-336-8683. So you all can call that or refer your friends to that. We also need tons of volunteers, right? And like this is, you know, many of the people who taught me about digital organizing, which I will say I don't know a lot about, but they often say everyone is a digital organizer. And I think that this year, everyone is a vote protector. You don't have to be a lawyer. You just have to arm yourself with the right information, talk to your friends, make sure they're registered, make sure they know where to get information about their polling place and vote by mail. And then I think everybody can be a part of this big voter protection operation.
By the way, there's one more thing I do want to add. By the way, before I do, I see a note in the chat saying, Rachana, can you either put the phone number in the chat or can you repeat it one more time? But I do want to say one more thing about youth voting after you do that.
Sure, I will put the number in the chat, but I will also say it. It's 833-336-8683.
Okay, wonderful. I did want to say one more thing about youth voting, because as Ashley described, we have about 20 different coalitions represented, different populations where we're trying to do outreach and hear from the community. What do they want? What do they need? Just one of the most dynamic for youth voting is headed by Hannah Bristol, who is a supporter of Elizabeth Warren and this great dynamic leader who is now again engaged with the campaign, with the Biden-Harris campaign, very much influencing it and a part of the movement. Hannah, as the coalition director for youth, she has particularly a young progressives kickoff tomorrow at 12:30 Eastern time. And the link for it, the link to get into it, and the link to sign up and be part of just an exciting program she's got is joe.link/ capital Y, capital A, capital T, teams. So YA teams. She sent me what the list is. She's got a welcoming committee, an organizing committee, an amplification committee, a storytellers committee, a designers committee, an event planners committee, a policy rollout committee, a fundraising team, a state teams. And by the way, you'll even notice the fundraising is grassroots fundraising, and it's, I don't know, item 10 down the list. What we want is people's engagement, volunteer time. We want your ideas. We want your help.
And I'll just say she hosted a young progressive phone bank last night where it was mostly young people. It depends on how you want to define young. I think I'll let everyone develop their own definition. But they were calling into Texas to talk to young people and on the dollar, and they went out, over 16,000 calls went out to talk to young people. So we are doing the work. Okay.
And that goes with Adam Green from PCCC, who was organizing it. Again, organizations can decide what you want to do. We'd love to partner.
Okay, I'm gonna try and figure out this Q&A thing. Mike, do you want to throw me an assist, or do you want me to just?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. I've been looking at all the questions as they've been coming in. There's a ton of questions from all different folks. Some of them have already been answered, I think, or at least touched on. But let me go to one that hasn't. For staffers of former campaigns, and this is from an anonymous person. There's some folks with all their full name, some with only their first name, but this one is anonymous. But this is a person who's been a staffer of another primary campaign, who wants to get involved, wants to help. Feels like they don't know exactly how to plug in, and they asked how do these staffers who are very experienced and very knowledgeable, how do they get more engaged? How do they get more active in the campaign so that they're not just sort of getting emails and generic kind of things, but how do they get more plugged in?
Heather's your gal.
We have 4 regional directors in the coalition's division. And then in the 17 states that Ashley mentioned, there's not only a Biden-Harris state director, there's also a coalition's director. And then many of the coalitions also have staff people in the states. We are, I don't know if it's, we are intensely interested in reaching out to people who have the experience, the skill. You've already shown the commitment. And I know I've been talking to folks from both Senator Sanders and Senator Warren and other campaigns, and have welcomed them in and then tried to connect them either in national efforts that we're doing or in the states. It's really in the states where we need to identify the people who'll carry on the practical work. If you want to sign up for our progressives work, you can text 30330 progress, and you'll get daily talking points. You'll get action alerts, things that we're doing. I'm a little concerned about the level of overload if I give out my personal email again. With this crowd,
Heather, why don't you, someone else asked, and this is a related question, they asked about whether there's a listserv specifically for progressive.
Yes, there is.
And there is. So why don't you tell them about that?
Well, if you text progress to 30330, we do morning and evening talking points. We announce various actions, things like this progressive watch party that we have Monday night, just before the convention starts, and other events like the events that Hannah is starting. So we welcome you to do that, and you'll be on our list.
And I would also say, if you text that will also give you the volunteer opportunities. If you want to, if you're looking to work on the campaign, I would suggest signing up there, and there also are alerts on, there's jobs listed on our joebiden.com website. I think it's called Join Our Team. We are aggressively still hiring in different states, but if you're looking for volunteer opportunities, those will come through our text link also, because what I am hearing is that you want more than emails, you actually want to get to work. So that's a great thing too.
And Ashley, if I could just build on that and say that you can also go to the Democrats website, where they have lots of state positions posted down with the coordinated campaigns out in the states. So there are a lot of opportunities out there too.
I do want to say that I personally, on behalf of the campaign, was empowered to reach out to both the Sanders campaign, the Warren campaign, and many other campaigns, as well as people who are just, people not taking a college year this year or not doing whatever they thought they were going to do, to encourage them to apply, because we need the talent, we need your skills.
Thanks for that, Mike. Next question.
Okay, yeah, so some of the questions are about issues, and I'm going to ask the first question that came up on issues, but I also just want to say to the folks here, I mean, this panel is really about campaign strategy and about getting people involved and keeping people involved. So it's not, we're not talking as much about policy here. But I did want to address the fact that there have been some issues questions. One of them is, from a Medicare for All advocate, and someone on the panel might want to address the issue task force that Sanders and Biden put together by Sanders and Biden people, and the continuing involvement on that. There was also a jobs-related question referencing, I think Cristobal was talking about jobs, and someone concerned about worker safety and forcing people back too early, and the fact that the economic plan needed to have a reflection of the dangers. So I'll just throw that back to you all, and you can talk about your issues process.
Hey there, it's Cristobal here. I can take a couple of these. I'll address the Unity Task Force work, having served on the Unity Task Force, and then I can talk about worker safety and essential workers. I'll take us one step back. I want to bring us back to the day that Senator Sanders endorsed Vice President Biden. I remember it was like this. We were on a Zoom. The Vice President and Senator Sanders were on a Zoom, and I'll never forget the interaction between the two. What you could see there was a mutual admiration and respect, and really a friendship there. And I remember when the endorsement was made, and Joe Biden, looked through the Zoom at Senator Sanders and said, I understand and appreciate all of the folks who put their heart and soul into the movement that you led. And he wanted them to know, Joe Biden wanted them to know that they have a home here on this campaign. And so many of us have been hard at work to do that, to do the outreach, to make the connections, to connect with progressives across the spectrum, letting them know they have a home here. And, we all have, like me, I'll speak for myself, Atia, who was, I have a big family of Atia, who is a Bernie person. I also have Atia who used to vote for Trump. And we're bringing everybody in to this campaign because of what's at stake and what's needed. And I thought it was such an important moment with Senator Sanders. And, Joe Biden, being who he is, never once spiked the football. We never really, even had a real victory lap or wanted to during the primary, because it was all about getting the work done and building this movement together and recognizing, again, the importance of the folks that were supporting Sanders and Warren and other incredible leaders. And part of that process meant we needed to develop these unity task forces. So we had 6 unity task forces that Joe Biden and Senator Sanders together appointed that were hammering out some of the biggest, most complicated issues of our time. And I got to tell you, it was so impressive to see what came out of these task forces that fed into what is the Democratic platform. Extremely progressive, the most progressive that we've ever seen, dealing with really complicated issues from immigration to the economy to criminal justice to the environment to healthcare. And so we will see very soon, because next week is the Democratic convention, all of this hard work and this unity coming together. And so that lives on. It'll grow through the platform. And if we are so lucky, this will be effective in winning seats up and down the ballot in November, because this is the blueprint for the Democratic Party. So whether you're in California and Texas and Florida, throughout, up and down the ballot from president on down, this is going to be our platform. On the issue of worker safety, I'm glad you raised that. you know, there are people on the front lines that are putting their lives at risk every single day for the rest of us, for this country to continue on. And the vice president realizes that, recognizes that. He understands the healthcare workers, the essential workers, and spoke to LULAC about maybe, I would say 6 weeks ago, to address this issue, and said several things about this. Number one, absolutely, we need to make sure that folks have the personal protection that's needed, that we shouldn't rush back into things. You heard him yesterday talking about needing to ensure that folks wear masks. He's also saying that for these essential workers that are keeping our country going and putting their lives at risk, that they need to be paid. There needs to be a reward for that incredible work that they're doing. They need to get a raise. But importantly, we've got to follow the health, we've got to follow the science, and we need to make sure that people are safe. So I really appreciate you raising that question. In his speech, by the way, to LULAC, he noted especially meatpacking workers and other workers, calling for real protections for these workers, including labor protection and others. I don't know, Rachana, Ashley, if you have other things to add. I know there's a few other questions as part of that too.
I did want to actually say something about the convention. So we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I can count how many times I've actually left my house in Washington, D.C. since March. I am frustrated. I am sick of being here. We don't have to be here. We are here because of failed leadership in Donald Trump. And because of that, our convention is going to look very different this year. And I was in a conversation with somebody the other day, and they were like, but who's giving like the keynote like Obama did in 2004? It is not an 2004 convention. It is a 2020 convention in the middle of a pandemic, and it is not going to be as long, but it is still going to be as powerful as every other, and maybe even more power than every other convention. And we want to make sure that every community gets to have a voice and a space in this convention. We used to have, Heather mentioned this, 20 hours of programming. We have 8 now. It's going to be on prime time. It will be from 9 to 11 every night. We have watch parties that will feature other speakers. And Heather talked about her watch party, but we'll have them from coalitions. We're having thousands of watch parties throughout that will feature surrogates and other politicians and celebrities before the official program starts. But we have not announced all of our speakers. We are going to continue to roll out speakers. We put out a first wave, but we will continue to announce speakers up through the convention beginning. So I've seen a couple questions about that, and I just wanted to address it head on. There are people who you folks are asking to speak that you might not see there, but there are still announcements to be made. So it is going to be exciting. There are going to be calls to action. You will see what America looks like in our convention, which will be very counter to what you will see the week after at the RNC convention. So I just wanted to talk about what you have in store. And most importantly, people will be safe and they will not get COVID because of our Democratic convention. So
two other examples of some of the excitement that'll happen around the convention, because I saw one of these was semi-raised in the chat. And that is, there also are other events. We would like people to go to the state pre-watch parties or the coalition pre-watch parties. As I said, I'm promoting the one for progressives. But Saru Jayaman is having one for One Fair Wage. I saw there was a question, 2 questions, I think, early on about One Fair Wage. By the way, it's another, Joe Biden has supported changing the sub-minimum wage for tip workers from $2.13 an hour, just unthinkable, into One Fair Wage. And Saru Jayaman's having one of these watch parties. There's another one, United Against Trump. There are all kinds of people coming together.
Okay, there's been a lot of questions about the post office, about mail. And a lot of that was addressed in the panel discussion by different people. But I wanted to highlight a couple of things, a couple of questions that have come in. One is people, there was asking about, like we saw this in Georgia in 2018. signatures on mail-in voters getting thrown out because supposedly the signatures didn't match. How do we prevent that from happening? There was a question about the removal of the mail sorting machines and how that's going to affect the ability to get the mail out and get the votes back in. So people have a lot of concerns about that, and Rachana, you in particular addressed that some of that already, but I wanted to raise these particular questions so that you could talk about them.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that, some of these things, look, I mean, they are of concern to voters. They are of deep concern to me. These laws that you mentioned, the signature matching laws. So they look at, when you vote by mail, they look at the signature there on the ballot. They make sure it matches the signature that they have on file. Different states have different rules. Again, I feel like I say that all the time, but really voting is actually such a local experience because Secretary of States make different rules, state legislatures make different rules, all the way down to election administrators make different rules on a whole variety of different pieces that affect your voting experience. And signature matching is one of them. I think on the whole, we think these laws are terrible. They don't really do much to prevent fraud, and they do disproportionately affect Asian Americans, African Americans, anyone with a complicated name American. They more affect people who have a disability, or people as they age, your signature changes, or sometimes you just have messy handwriting like me. So I think that, these laws are complicated and problematic. I think between now and November, so I try to think about voter protection as what we can do right now. What can we do right now to make the biggest difference? And I think it's really unlikely that we will be able to change all of the rules governing voting between now and November. But what we can do is we are, like some of our organizing team and our field program, they are looking out for people whose ballots have been rejected. In certain states, we can get those lists. Then we reach out to people and we say, hey, you had this problem. Either you didn't submit your ID and you should have, or your signature didn't match. And we help walk them through the process of making sure that they take the additional steps needed to make sure their vote counts. So that's sort of how we're addressing that piece. I know there's a lot of concern about the Postal Service. I share those concerns, but I want to step back a bit and say, we know what Donald Trump is trying to do here. He's trying to do the same thing that he was trying to do in 2016, which is undermine the integrity of our election. He wants you to question whether your vote will count. And he's doing this at the same time that he himself and his advisors are voting by mail. At the same time as Republicans are sending out mailer after mailer, encouraging their supporters to vote by mail in North Carolina, in Michigan, lots of other states. So don't be fooled by this. Vote by mail is a good option. It's not your only option. So if you feel uncomfortable with vote by mail, you can still vote in person during early vote or on election day, depending on what's available in your state. You can also participate in the vote by mail system in different ways. You can apply for a vote by mail ballot online in many states. You can return your vote by mail ballot through drop boxes like we talked about before. So there are other opportunities. I think the key here is engage in this process early so you can make sure that you have time to complete the whole process, and that if there are any hiccups along the way, that you have time to correct.
Okay, thank you. There was a good question about this is the most digital election ever, not just because the technology keeps getting more and more digital, but because we can't do rallies, we can't do door knocking, and there was a concern that a lot of people are getting so much email, a lot of it fundraising emails. They're getting so many texts that they're starting to just sort of shut down and delete all those emails, delete all those texts. How is the campaign sort of thinking about keeping people engaged digitally in the face of that tendency to just say too much?
Yeah, we had record-breaking signups in the last 48 hours. And I agree. I've unsubscribed to a lot of different lists, but I think with the announcement of Senator Harris as a running mate, I think with the announcements of Joe Biden's most recent policies and some of his upcoming policies, people are ready to go, and they're ready to get to work. And our volunteer infrastructure in our states continues to expand week after week. I think one of the things that we have learned and over the last 6 months, there's been people doing digital organizing since before COVID. It just hasn't been the full effort of our movement. But one of the things that we have learned over the last 6 months is that who you get the message from matters, right? So Joe Biden is a great messenger. Kamala Harris is a great messenger, but I'm actually a better messenger to my friends. So we are reaching people who won't unsubscribe and won't not respond to the text, but in getting them and asking them to communicate. And that's the relational mapping that we're doing in our Vote Joe app. That's some of the group organizing that we're doing in WhatsApp groups and group me's and DM groups online, because we don't have time to convince people to download a Joe app if they just want to talk on WhatsApp. We got to talk to them on WhatsApp. And so we're hitting people in different types of verticals. I also will say that we made an announcement. Well, let me actually rewind back to June. We went up on Spanish language media and we went up on Black media earlier than any other presidential campaign has in history. And we've been up and we've stayed up. We are going in local, we're making our national buys, and we made an announcement a couple weeks ago about what you will start seeing on TV and in radio on a national level. But we also are buying ads in local weeklies in language and smaller communities that are often overlooked in presidential campaigns. In the Asian American Pacific Islander community, and not done proper translation to communicate with folks. We are doing local radio buys. We are hitting not just the digital, because people still are living their lives, many of them in certain places, and we're relying on those grocery stores to push information out, churches to push information out, but also local media and press, and not just doing it only through earned, but through paid media. But that relational organizing component is huge for us. I will say the phone bank that I mentioned last night was pretty much a relational organizing experience, right? We had someone on as a surrogate who brought their volunteers on, and then they had a community experience to reach other voters in Texas. So we know we have to get creative. By no stretch of the imagination am I trying to say we have the whole game figured out. That's why we need great minds like everyone who is on this Zoom, but that's just some of the work that we're doing.
Great. Another question came in, which I thought was terrific about, Trump is obviously such a terrible racist, which we all know, and we all talk about the hate that he's putting out. But this person was asking, is there a sort of broader narrative around hate and racism that the campaign is trying to promote? We've seen examples over the last couple of years, the race class narrative that your pollster, Celinda Lake, helped develop. Is the campaign going to be pushing a narrative around racism and hate that people can carry, like in the relational organizing and in the other organizing that they're doing?
I can start. Yeah, I'm happy to start us off and then turn it over to my fellow panelists. I think, look, here's the thing. If you look back at when Joe Biden launched his candidacy for president, the very first announcement that he made, the first thing he said was what brought him to that decision was what happened in Charlottesville. It was at that point that he realized that that the country, that he needed to enter the race, as he put it, for the battle of the soul of our country, and to unify our country. It had a profound impact on him. He talks about it frequently, seeing the images in Charlottesville of these white supremacists marching with their tiki torches, as he puts it, with their veins contorted in their necks, using the same anti-Semitic bile that we heard, that was heard in Hitler's Germany. And it had a profound impact on him. And it's why he decided to run for president. And on the flip side, you've got a guy in Donald Trump who, as you put it, is a straight up racist, and who, in some ways, used that to his advantage in 2016 by dividing voters, by spewing really outrageous, horrible things, using racist language. And I would actually say we can connect the dots to the sort of language that Donald Trump has used to an increase in hate crimes across all of our communities, including, as I mentioned earlier, the El Paso shooter who used comments about a Hispanic invasion of Texas, which is similar almost exactly to the language that Donald Trump used in 2018 when he was trying to scare voters about quote unquote caravans coming to the border with dangerous criminals in them. I mean, it's the same outrageous BS that we've heard time and time again from Donald Trump. And what Trump is trying to do is divide the country to create this disunity, and importantly, to distract from the most important issues of our time. And then right now is the pandemic, it's COVID, it's the health crisis, and Trump does not want this election to be about him, surprisingly. Maybe the first time in his life he doesn't want something to be about him. But the minute this becomes a referendum, which it is, on Donald Trump, he loses the election. And so what you're seeing and beginning to see again with the anti-immigrant ads that just dropped today in a number of states, and you're going to see a lot more of this outrageous racism and xenophobia, is his attempt to distract. Our job is to keep our eye on the ball. We need to make sure that we are putting forward our positive message. And part of that is rebuilding our middle class, making sure that the people can climb into the middle class. And as the vice president said, this time when we rebuild the middle class, everybody's coming along. Yes, we'll push back on the racism and the white supremacy, as the vice president did on August 3rd. And we'll again, but again, our job, let's focus on the job at hand. Don't get distracted by Donald Trump and his racism.
And by the way, I see another question in the chat that's about this, that's important for the campaign to take on an anti-racism approach. I just was reading from official talking points that I was given that also are reflected. I just came minutes before this event. I came from a meeting with Dr. Jill Biden that was on Social Security. Today's the 85th anniversary of Social Security. President Biden and Kamala Harris will expand and protect and expand it. Trump will destroy it. But in her comments, in Dr. Biden's comments, she talked about the problem of systemic racism in the society. And in these official talking points, just to the person who said it needs to be more central in the campaign, or central in the campaign, it is. And just to say, says, this has to be a wake-up call. It's a much longer comment. A wake-up call for our nation, a call to action. It's fully past time to confront systemic racism, to end our growing economic inequality, and to deal with the denial of our nation's promise to so many. It goes on much longer, but I do think it's, and one of the things that's attractive to the campaign for me is that the people in the campaign that I've met so far also feel this at their core. Almost all the people I work with in the campaign have been part of organizing against racism and sexism and economic injustice, homophobia, and other ways that the country is divided and been divided, particularly by Trump.
So there's a question, and there's a number of different questions about sort of how the Biden team relates to progressives. Won't be able to get to them all, but there was a question specifically about how will a Biden administration, how do you all expect him to engage the left once he becomes president? And I thought that was worth asking. And just as a comment, as someone who has been the progressive liaison before in the White House in the past, or in transitions in the past, I think one of the signs is how they relate to the left during the campaign. The fact that they they hired Heather Booth, who is one of the leading progressive leaders and activists over the last half century, I think is a good sign. And the fact that Heather and really the whole coalition's team and senior advisors like Cristobal have been so active in reaching out to progressives. Simone Sanders, who used to work for Bernie, has been so active. She's one of the very senior people in the campaign. So I've been very impressed with the way that you all have been relating to the left, the task forces that Bernie and Biden set up. All of these, I think, are good examples. But I wanted to let the panel respond to that question.
I can start. It's hard to talk about exactly what will happen in an administration if like I don't think I'm going to work in the administration. So, but I will say I can relate to what happened in the Obama-Biden administration because I did work for them at the White House in the Office of Public Engagement. And we did just that. We engaged with progressives. We engaged with civil rights groups. We engaged with women reproductive groups. And I think people's record speaks volumes of what they will do in the future. And the vice president's proof points of how he, when he was a sitting vice president, engaged with groups, including the progressive groups, if it's any indication of what type of administration he will have and any indication of what campaign we're building, there will be a seat at the table for progressives, for civil rights activists, for women and health, healthcare activists, reproductive health, racial justice activists. I wouldn't be on this campaign if it wasn't. I wouldn't have worked in the Obama-Biden administration if it wasn't. It is part of, you know, they are not just talking points when we say people have a seat at the table. We actually mean it. We are spending 90 minutes in a room, and you know, pretty senior people are spending 90 minutes in conversation with all of you because we care about what you're thinking. We care about what you want to see in the campaign, and we're committed to it. There's a lot going on in the last 3 days, and there's a lot going to be happening in the next 3 days, but we want to be here because this community, this engagement is not a transactional engagement, it's a partnership. We are extending a hand as a partner, and we hope that you extend your hand, or maybe we just elbow bump in the moment of COVID, but I'm extending my elbow and I hope you extend your elbow, and we can build this partnership together.
I do want to add two thoughts to what Ashley said, and I agree with all she said. Just imagine how exciting it is that rather than spending every day stopping the tearing down of everything we've built up over the last 50 years, you actually have an opening to rebuild and then make it better, build back better, and keep on our organizing to make it even better than we can now imagine it. The proposals of the campaign are bolder and more embracing because of the nature of the movement that you all are building. Just imagine, today there was news about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that it's so, people may know I ran the campaign to win the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that Elizabeth Warren is originally conceived of. Well, there was a story about how California is going to try and create another Consumer Protection Bureau because the current bureau is so shackled. Well, what if it was both unleashed, and then we could go even further? Or I mentioned this methane change, that what's happening to the post office. Rather than having a person in charge of the post office who wants to destroy it, having someone in charge who actually cares about postal workers themselves, as well as delivering the mail and providing this incredible service. So each thing, just imagine how far we can go, but we have to win the election. It's a prerequisite. The last thing I just want to say, because I was so touched by Mike's comments, Mike has been my partner in this movement in different ways. Mike, I think it was it 1989 that we met, 88?
No, not 1980, actually.
1980. So what's 10 years when you're having fun? Anyway, and I rely on him greatly, his advice, and bringing the wisdom of the Netroots Nation also, as well as grassroots organizing, and an inside-outside approach who knows what you can make changes, both from the inside and the outside. I do want to thank the other people who are staffing this effort. Lauren Windsor is helping him right now, his partner in justice, let's say, not partner in crime. I do want to thank Satchel Tsai, who is my assistant, my deputy. In many ways, I say she's my brains. I couldn't function without her because she knows more about the Netroots. And so we've got an intergenerational effort. Nolan Treadway and Denise, who are staffing this behind the scenes. This campaign is about the people behind the scenes, inside, outside, moving forward.
So I think we have time for a couple more questions, and to make things go more quickly, I will ask both of them and let folks comment on them. One is there was a question about door knocking, and this has actually been on my mind as well. The Trump people are being very aggressive, too aggressive, of course, given public health concerns. But they're also, progressives are creating models of safe door knocking, socially distanced with masks and all of that. And so there was a question about whether the campaign is going to engage at all as we get closer on doing any kind of door knocking strategies. And then I'll ask the other question now so that we make sure we get it in. I thought there was a very important question about the potential of armed militia showing up at polling places to do voter intimidation. And I mean, you know, we've all, those of us who care about voting protection have been dealing with versions of this, frankly, for many years, but it will probably be more aggressive than ever. And so I thought if someone could respond on that as well.
I can take the door knocking. Rachana, do you want to deal with the armed militia? Not to punt the hard question, but we're going to take this week by week, day by day, and determine what happens based on where COVID is. If spikes continue, we are not saying no to everything, but at this point, we are not on the doors because we don't think it's the safest thing for our staff and our volunteers. I would love to hear about some of the innovative ways that people are doing socially distance. I've got a couple ideas too, and we're exploring them, and maybe we'll test them out. And so if folks have ideas about ways to do it, maybe we can get connected via mic. Because we're not saying no to everything, but right now we just need to be safe, and we need to monitor what's going on with the virus, because safety is our first, and leading by example is what we really want to do with this campaign. But I totally understand how important door knocking is as an organizer at heart. But we can do hard things, is what our campaign manager always says, and we are creative. And one thing I know about movement is that, you know, it is fluid. And when an obstacle stands in front of it, and not being able to door knock might be that obstacle, we find a way around it, over it, under it, or maybe we go through it. But we think we can get this done even if we don't have as many door knocks as we might have thought originally, but we're open to ideas. And Rachana, I'll let you maybe close us out.
Great, thank you, Ashley. I really appreciate what you said about, you know, movement and being fluid, because I think as we're thinking about the challenges that lie ahead of us between now and November, be they the challenges of the pandemic or the challenges of vote by mail or the challenges of militias at polling places, the thing that we have to keep in mind is this is too important to not participate in. And I know that it's daunting, and I know that it can be scary, but I also know that we can do it. And we have the right people thinking about these things. We have some of the smartest lawyers in the country on these problems right now, making sure we're prepared for any and every contingency. So do know that. But I think that the responsibility that we all bear as individuals is we need to figure out how to vote. And if you don't want to go to the polling place, you don't have to. You can vote by mail. So like, work with everybody you know to make sure that they are figuring out those things now. You know, what is your comfort level with in-person activity? What is your comfort level with voting by mail? You have plenty of time between now and November to figure out the best option for you, the best option for your friends and family, and we are here to help you with that. So reach out to us. We can arm you with information. We can help you navigate these issues and these concerns. It's going to be a big challenge, but I am really proud of the team that we have on board, and I'm really excited to work with each and every single one of you as we get there together.
Thank you. So we have 3 minutes left of our panel. I will let that be your closing statement. Is that okay, Rachana? I would like to give, you know, a minute to both Heather and Cristobal to close us out, and then I'll say final words. So why don't we start with you, Heather?
When I opened up, I mentioned how I started when I was a young teenager, really about 13 or 14, in the civil rights movement. And in the civil rights movement, people said, are you willing to die for freedom? I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. But I was willing to take that risk if needed. I think now, while some people may die in this struggle, I think the real question is, are you willing to live for freedom and justice and democracy? Are you willing to do the work every day, make the calls, do the texts, talk to your neighbors, figure out how to amplify, join the campaign, combine it with the movement, organize on the outside, organize on the inside, but organize together to stop Trump, elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and bring a future that is more hopeful, caring, loving, and small d, as well as big D, democratic.
Heather, that was beautiful. I should just stop. I'll just say real quick, just honestly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for joining us today. I have not missed the Netroots. I just think y'all are doing such incredibly important work. I'm so happy to be part of your family. The one and only thing I'll say is ignore the polls, really ignore the polls. I was in Hillary Clinton's office the night we lost the election. I remember walking in that morning, never ever entered my mind that we were gonna lose. That's a feeling that no one on this campaign has, and neither should you, and that we need to make sure that we're keeping our foot to the pedal here. In the final days of this election, we're not going to take any voter for granted. We have to work every single day, every single hour, and not miss a beat, because there's just way too much at stake in this election. And I promise you, we're not taking it for granted. You can't either. Last note is, one of my favorite Mexican dichos or sayings is, dime con quien andas y te diré quién eres. Tell me who stands with you, who walks with you, and I'll tell you who you are. And the fact that all of you are standing with us, with Joe Biden, with Senator Harris, that means the world to us. And I think that's what gives me the most hope about these final days. So with that, I want to thank you and appreciate you.
Well, I'll just close by saying thank you to the entire Netroots team. Thank you to Mike, who always is sending encouraging words and advice and passing along. If you want to get in personal contact with us, Mike, can I offer you up and help and help us get connected? But we are here. We are so excited to be in partnership with you all, and thank you for having us.
Organize.
Bye, y'all.
Elect.